بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وبشروه بغلام عليم. وقال تعالى: فبشرناها بإسحاق ومن وراء إسحاق يعقوب. وقال تعالى: ووهبنا له إسحاق ويعقوب كلا هدينا ونوحا هدينا من قبل ومن ذريته داود وسليمان وأيوب ويوسف وموسى وهارون وكذلك نجزي المحسنين. صدق الله العظيم. Alhamdulillah, brothers and sisters, we're continuing with this series, Quranic reflections, the lives of the prophets and the pious who are mentioned in the Quran. And as we mentioned previously, the life of every single one of these messengers is an example for us. And in the lives of the messengers, we see a example of every single adversity that humankind can ever go through, whether it's sickness, whether it's enmity, whether it's other hardships and other difficulties. The lives of the prophets that are mentioned in the Quran. Tonight, we read Surah Hud, which, as we discussed, the life of Hud alayhi salam, Nuh alayhi salam is mentioned there. Many other prophets are mentioned in there. And then after that, we commenced the story in the surah of Surah Yusuf, the Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam. So we see that a large portion of the Quran is just the stories of the Anbiya. And again, as we mentioned, and every night I like to remind these points so that it becomes embedded in our memories and embedded in our minds. Allah Azza wa Jal mentions these stories. وَكُلًّا نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ مِنْ أَنْبَاءِ الرُّسُلِ مَا نُثَبِّتُ بِهِ فُؤَادَكَ. This ayat was read tonight as well. And all of these stories that we relate to you, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, is so that we strengthen your heart through that. So from this we understand that Allah Ta'ala is telling us that these stories have in them something where it will give you tathbeet, it will give you fortification, it will give you strength, it will give you inspiration. So inshallah that we take inspiration from their stories. From amongst the messengers, after Sayyidina Ismail alayhi salam comes his brother Sayyidina Ishaq. And Ismail and Ishaq, they have a direct connection obviously with Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam. The symbolism and the legacy of the sons of Abraham, they are related directly to Ibrahim alayhi salam. And what I mean by that is Ismail and Ishaq, who are the two sons of Abraham, they were actually the gift of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for Abraham, and they were the fruits of his sacrifice. I want to remind you of the story of Ibrahim. How many difficulties did he go through? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about Ibrahim that وَإِذِ ابْتَلَى إِبْرَاهِيمَ رَبُّهُ بِكَلِمَاتٍ فَأَتَمَّهُنْ. And remember when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tested Ibrahim alayhi salam with so many trials, and he fulfilled every single one of them. So remember that all the sons of Ibrahim alayhi salam that he was blessed with, it came after the age of 80. According to the most narrations, 70, some say 80. So we know that the entire life of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam passed, and up to, you can say, almost 70 years of age, Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam just went through sacrifices. That's all he did. His entire life, almost like an entire lifetime of a normal human being. Obviously, the prophets were given long lives. Some of them lived to be 180 years old. Nuh alayhi salam lived to be 1,000 years old. But what Allah Ta'ala took from Ibrahim alayhi salam is that the normal life of an average person of this day and age, what would it be? About 70 years of age. That's like the average. 60 to 70 is the average age. That was the time that Ibrahim alayhi salam went through the sacrifices of his life. Meaning an entire lifetime, first Allah took nothing but sacrifice from him. An entire lifetime Allah took nothing but hardships and difficulties from him. Therefore, brothers and sisters, we take solace and we take a lesson from this, that we should not be disturbed through a long life of sacrifice. if difficulties come in our life and it looks like those difficulties never come to an end, think about Nuh alayhi salam. 950 years he remained in that. And think about Ibrahim alayhi salam. You would think that if a person goes through trouble 70 years of his life, there's no light at the end of the tunnel. If you were suffering for 70 years of your life, you would not imagine that there's light at the end of the tunnel. We go through 1 year of difficulty or 5 years of difficulty or 20 years of difficulty and we see, okay, there's no hope. But Ibrahim alayhi salam's story gives us hope that at the end of this, there is, hope. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him the fruits of his sacrifices of that one lifetime. That 70, 80 years, which all these stories that we read about Abraham, the sacrificing of his son, and being thrown in the fire, and the breaking of the idols, and then being exiled from his home, and being the only Muslim in the entire world. Being the only Muslim in the entire world. That's another point to understand about Ibrahim alayhi salam. Ibrahim alayhi salam was, for the longest time, the only one who believed in the oneness of God and Tawheed. It was Sayyidina Ibrahim. He was the only Muslim in the entire world. That is why this was another test, that when Ibrahim alayhi salam was passing through Egypt, there was an evil king, a tyrant king in Egypt, that anyone that king would see with their wife or their spouse, then that king would take advantage. He would take that person's wife and he would take advantage of her. And when Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam went there, they asked, who is this? Who's this woman with you? So what did he say? He said, this is my sister. It's very famous. And now, did Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam lie? And the answer to that is that it was true. That was his sister in Islam. And he said that me and Sarah, that was his wife Sarah, he said, we're the only two Muslims on the face of this earth. So from that we understand that there was no other believers in Tawheed, others in the world on earth, other than Sayyidina Ibrahim and Sarah. And that is why he said about her, this is my sister in Islam, because we are the only two believers on the face of this earth. Imagine the sacrifices. Inna Ibrahim kana ummatan. Ibrahim alayhi salam was an ummah on his own. You know what we call an ummah? Ummah is a nation. Ummah is a group of people. Ummah is a community. Allah Ta'ala said about Ibrahim alayhi salam, Inna Ibrahim kana ummatan. Ibrahim alayhi salam on his own, he was an ummah. And this is the strength we should have. Don't be afraid that you are the only Muslim. Don't be afraid if you're the only one who is wearing hijab, or you're the only one in your school who is praying, or you're the only one at work who has the name Muhammad. Don't ever be ashamed of that. Because when you stand alone, you are not alone. You are an ummah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about those who stand alone, they're not alone. They themselves represent Islam in such a beautiful way that they themselves are an ummah. They are a whole nation because you represent a nation. Because you're standing for your whole nation. It doesn't matter who. It doesn't matter if anybody's standing with you, because Allah is standing with you. Allah is with you. With that being said, so then what is Ismail and Ishaq? Ismail and Ishaq, they represent the divine blessings and the continuity. Ibrahim alayhi salam, he was as a gift of that lifetime of sacrifice. Allah Ta'ala said, okay, now you're going to reap the benefits of this sacrifice. Now you're going to get your retirement. Now you're going to get the blessings and the fruits of your sacrifice. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him Ismail. And then وَمِن وَرَاءِ إِسْمَاعِيلَ إِسْحَاقَ. And after Ismail, Allah Ta'ala gave Ishaq. And therefore, Ishaq was born as a miraculous gift to Ibrahim and Sarah in their old age. And it is mentioned that أَنَّهُ وُلِدَ وَلِأَبِيهِ 100 سَنَةً بعد أخيه إسماعيل ب14 سنة. He says that Ishaq was born to Sayyidina Ibrahim when he was 100 years old. And the story of it is mentioned in the Quran, Surah Hud, that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came to Ibrahim, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the two angels to Ibrahim and he brought them the roasted calf, the angels were going to tell Ibrahim alayhi salam about the punishment that is going to descend on Lut, on the people of Lut. on the Qawm Lut. And before he could give him the bad news, first he gave him the good news. And what was the good news that he gave him? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَوَهَبْنَا لَهُ إِسْحَاقَ وَيَعْقُوبَ كُلًّا هَدَيْنَا. And we gave Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam Ishaq, and we gave Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam Yaqub, yani after that. So this was actually a miraculous gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to Ibrahim and Sarah in their age and their old age, showing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's promises do not fail. And that anyone who gives their sacrifice for the sake of Allah ta'ala, and anyone who struggles for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not put their hopes and put their sacrifices to loss. And his life also represents divine grace and the continuity of righteousness through generations. This is another important point to understand, that the objective of Ibrahim alayhi salam of establishing the deen, it was not only restricted to him. And this is another thing that all of us should be concerned about. Many of the prophets of the Quran that are mentioned, many of them had this concern that my progeny should be people who are believers. My children should be people who are believers. This is a very, very important lesson, that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses us with children, our children sometimes become that which is what we wished for, right? Sometimes they become something else, right? And this can happen. Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam's children. Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam, one of his sons, he took his own path. So it doesn't mean that every single time, whatever the father is, the child will also become like that. But when a person has this concern, just like Zakaria alayhi salam, inshallah we're going to get to the story of Zakaria alayhi salam. He was also had become an old man. And we're going to discuss like how he was imploring and begging Allah, oh Allah, my head has become white, and my bones have become frail, and I have become an old man, and my wife is barren. She cannot have children. But I am afraid that after me, if I pass away, there will be nobody who will carry this legacy. What does this teach us? This is the same fikr and same gham that Ibrahim alayhi salam had, that after me, who will be in the world? Brothers and sisters, every Muslim should have this concern. And I've heard parents say this, oh, Banishan, Bas Khudishan Yad Migiran. Yeah, leave them. They just figure it out on their own. What are they going to figure out on their own? What's this mentality? That we don't care about our kids, whether they pray or don't pray. We don't care about our kids, whether they fast or they don't fast. This is not a Quranic and this is not an Islamic concept, that we let them figure it out on their own. Do you let your children figure out other things on their own? Let him go touch the electricity, and then when he gets electrocuted and he dies, then he'll learn his lesson. This is not the way you teach kids, right? You should warn them from beforehand so that they do not suffer, so that they do not burn, so that they do not perish. That's the job of a parent. More than anything else, our concern should be about this. And this is a prophetic concern. This is a prophetic fikr, a prophetic gham, that our progenies after us should also be Muslim. And when parents, before they even have their children, they have this concern. Both mother and father. That's why all of the youngsters that are here and you're not married, marry a man and marry a woman, marry a spouse. Marry a spouse that has this concern, that we want pious children. We want children that will be people of Allah, people that will be concerned about deen. Have this concern when you're married. Don't do it like last minute. Then wife, she has another concern, right? She wants, I want, my son to go into modeling. And another one is, I want my, daughter to become a gymnastics, acrobatic. So, I mean, you can't figure that out later. This is where problems arise. You have to have this concern, right? When you are, before even marrying, that you be concerned about this, that our concern for our future progenies. And the more we have this fikr, this is a prophetic gham, this is a prophetic fikr. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions this, that this was the gham and the fikr of the prophets, that what will my progeny be after me? And when a mother and father, they have that concern, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will actually bless the children with that, with whatever concern you have. And that is why, subhanAllah, brothers and sisters, when a child becomes hafiz, it's the mother and father that will get a crown of nur on the Day of Judgment. This is the reward of the hafiz of the Quran. It says that when a child becomes hafiz, the mother and father of that hafiz, right, they will be given a crown of light on the Day of Judgment. Do you know why that is? It's because it was the fikr and the concern of the mother and father. Without the concern, without the encouragement of the mother and father, that child would have never went on that path. And that is why before even the child could be given the crown, the mother and father is given the crown because of that support. You see in other communities, whatever you give importance to your children, some people give importance to sports, and this sports is a good thing. You know, you have these wrestling families, you know, fathers like, you know, I want my son to be, you know, champion, state champion in wrestling. And he'll, day and night, his concern is, and his son becomes that. Other kids, you know, other parents, they're like, I want my, you know, son to become doctor. I want my son to become an engineer. And then they become that. They become that. To your fikr, to your gham, to your support. But along with all of that, that's all good. That's very important. We have to have that as well. I'm not saying that that's not something that we should have fikr about. That would be wonderful, they become state champion, right? But my point is like, if they don't have iman, what's the point of their state champion? They have no faith. I give you one example, brothers and sisters. Look at the example of Habib. You know, everybody knows Habib Nurmagomedov. He's an MMA fighter. He's a Dagestani. In all of Dagestan, deen is number one to them. Before anything else. They're wrestling champions of the world. Sambo champions, MMA champions of the world. But deen is number one for them. That one person who deen, he was raised by his father. He said, I don't care about anything else. Habib himself told me. He said, my father didn't want me to do MMA. Habib himself told me, my father didn't want me to do MMA. MMA is not good. I asked him about my son, and he says, I said, tell me about Yahya, you know, should he go into it? He said, no, I don't recommend. He said, the best sport is swimming, bicycling, swimming. He's telling me. He says, my dad didn't want me to go in it, but this is the direction that I went. And he says, the Muslim, he said, Yahya is going to read Quran for us. These guys are, they themselves, this is what they do. They're in wrestling, but deen is number one for them. Just recently, there was another fighter who won the belt last night, but there was another fighter, what did he say? He says, in Ramadan, fasting is the most important thing for him. He has a championship, he's fighting for the belt. He's fighting for the belt, but he's telling the whole world, on the platform, of the world platform, he's saying, more important to me is my fasting. It's Ramadan. The whole world knows what's Ramadan. The whole world knows that these people, religion and God is number one for them. So brothers and sisters, we're not saying that if a person is going to raise his children on deen, then they can't do anything else on this earth. Don't get this understanding from what I'm saying. Because we see that when you're raised with deen, and deen is number one for you, along with everything else that you do, but what influence will that have to the entire world? This one MMA fighter, everybody knows Habib now. This one, he changed the whole face of MMA. He says, you cannot talk about people's father. You cannot talk about people's religion. You cannot talk about God. You have to respect. He literally changed everybody. He made Islah of everybody. He rectified everybody through the deen. He said, God is number one for me. In his final speech when he was getting the Hall of Fame, what was his speech? He said that, and I want to say this, that everything I have is not because, I work hard. Listen to his speech. It's a very important speech when he was getting the Hall of Fame speech. Esau John, did you hear his speech? You got to listen to that speech in the Hall of Fame when they were giving him the Hall of Fame. He says, look, everybody works hard. I didn't get this because I work hard. Everybody has talent. Do they or don't they? There's a whole bunch of talented guys. There's a whole bunch of smart guys. There's a whole bunch of hardworking guys. Everybody's working hard. But he said, the reason why I got here is because of God gave me everything. God gave me everything. Imagine somebody is saying this on a public world platform. The amount of da'wah that they gave, even some of these podcasters, they're shocked, man, Islam is for real. They're saying that this is the real religion left on this earth. There's no other real religion because these people take their religion seriously. Look at that one person that he was raised by his parents, by his father, that deen is number one. He didn't tell him don't wrestle. He didn't tell him don't go in wrestling. He didn't tell him don't go in MMA. He told me, Habib told me, he said, my dad actually wanted me to go Olympics. He wanted me to go to Olympics and do sambo, but like the direction went in Olympic wrestling. Because that's more like of a honor for your country, right? But this MMA is kind of like, you know, it gets a little bit dirty. It gets a little bit dirty. He said he wanted me to go there because that's more honorable for the family. But why I'm talking about all of this, why this is essential? Because just as that, his father, Abdul Manaf rahmatullah alayh, the way he raised his kids, salat was number one. Deen was number one. It doesn't matter if it's Ramadan. You're going to train and you're going to fast. And then the people in the West, they're saying, we don't know what's the secret of these Dagestani fighters. We don't know what's the secret of these Dagestani fighters. The secret is Iman. The secret is God is first. Allah is first. Your deen is first. And when you raise your children with that type of integrity, somebody was making him, he says, what is this? Habib Nur Magamela. He said, hey, this is my name. It's Habib Nur Muhammadov. This is my name. And he's like teaching these guys, I'm not ashamed of my name. None of them changed their name. But what, one person, somebody can't say Muhammad, okay, you just call me Mo. He said, no, I am Habib Nur Muhammadov. This is who I am. And like the way that they were raised with so much pride, with so much like confidence. And what happened? That one person raised with confidence. He's not an alim. He's not a sheikh. He's not, and when I met with him, I told him this. I said, Habib, just take this advice of mine. The platform that you're on, this platform is a very, very powerful platform. You have to use this platform for the sake of deen, because something that a sheikh will say, it will not have that much effect of something that you will say. I could say something, people be like, okay, yeah, that's what you're supposed to say. Keep the khutbah for Jummah, Maulana Sahab. If I give somebody advice, they said, thank you, Maulana Sahab, keep your khutbah for Jummah. But if Habib or a champ or the MMA fighter, he says it, they're like, oh, wait a minute, okay, this is different. And I told him, this is why what you are and where you are is very important. And he took it, alhamdulillah, in a very beautiful way. But a lot of things that I learned from him is, what I learned from him is family upbringing. And the priorities and the importance that we give to our kids. And the continuity. This is what we're talking about, Ibrahim alayhi salam. Ibrahim alayhi salam was concerned more than anything else that I want this deen to flourish. I want that after I leave this world, as I was practicing Islam, my children must be practicing Islam. Brothers and sisters, I told my kids already. I said, if you have nothing, if you don't pray, I don't know you. I don't know you, you don't know me. Lakum dinukum waliya deen. If you don't have any connection with prayer, I don't care about you. If you don't have concern about your salat, if you don't care about Quran, if you don't care about fasting in the month of Ramadan, don't be nice with them. Tell them, you want to please me, please Allah, that's it. I don't care about anything else. Do it, figure it out. But your salat is number one. If you don't have concern for your salat, I'm not your father, plain and simple. You figure out the rest of it. Children will want to make their parents happy. But what do we say? Salat is not important. We don't care about salat. As long as you make money, make good money, drive a good car, have a good house, have a good life. Okay, yeah, then what have you raised? What have you achieved? That you left this world. What did you leave? What did you leave behind? This should be your concern and the concern of your spouse when you're becoming married, that our concern should be that in this world there should be people that will continue this La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah as long as we remain on this earth. And after that as well. We marry those who are like-minded to us. We marry those that have the same concern of us, that when I leave this world, that I leave people who are saying the kalima la ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. And this is the example that Ibrahim alayhi salam left. It was very important to them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that وَوَهَبْنَا لَهُ إِسْحَاقَ وَيَعْقُوبَ كُلًّا هَدَيْنَا. And we gave Ibrahim, because of his sacrifices for Iman, we gave him Ishaq, and we gave him Yaqub. Kullan hadayna. Each one of them we guided them. This because it was important for them. وَنُوحًا هَدَيْنَا مِنْ قَبْلِ. And Nuh alayhi salam we guided. وَمِنْ ذُرِّيَّتِهِ دَاوُودَ وَسُلَيْمَانَ وَأَيُّوبَ وَيُوسُفَ وَمُوسَى وَهَارُونَ وَكَذَلِكَ نَجْزِي الْمُحْسِنِينَ. And from his progeny, we brought Dawood and Sulaiman and Ayyub and Yusuf and Musa and Harun. This is his progeny. He had so much concern that this deen should perpetuate, this deen should continue, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَكَذَلِكَ نَجْزِي الْمُحْسِنِينَ. Those who do good, this is how we reward them. Be a good doer and have this concern that the deen should continue after me. This was what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed Ibrahim alayhi salam. When Ibrahim alayhi salam established Makkah Mukarramah as a city, the Kaaba, do you know what dua he made? He says, oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, رَبَّنَا لِيُقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةِ إِنِّي أَسْكَنْتُ مِنْ ذُرِّيَّتِي بِوَادٍ غَيْرِ ذِي زَرْعٍ عِنْدَ بَيْتِكَ الْمُحَرَّمِ. Oh Allah, I brought my family here. I settled my family in this place that has no fertile ground. You've seen now there's all hotels everywhere. But if you would have been in Makkah Mukarramah 30 years ago, you would have just seen mountains, rocks, and desert. He didn't take them and, drop his family off in Hawaii, right? At some resort. He dropped his family off fi wadin ghayri dhi zara'in. Oh Allah, this is a valley that doesn't have any leaf, any green plantation. Nothing is growing here. No water. The only source of water was the Zamzam, and that was a miracle. That was not even supposed to be there. That was a miracle from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. عند بيتك المكرم, بيتك المحرم or mukarram? بيتك المحرم. In this blessed sanctity, right? Why? رَبَّنَا لِيُقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةِ. Oh Allah, so that my progeny, they will be people of salah. They will be people of prayer. This is what I want from my progeny. رَبَّنَا لِيُقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةِ. This is the only reason that I established and I left my family in the middle of this desert in Makkah, in this haram, so that they established the prayer. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq that this what Ibrahim symbolized, what Ishaq and Ismail symbolized, that righteous progeny, that continuity, that sacrifice, that if we sacrifice and we constantly have this concern, you will then eventually, Allah Ta'ala will take your children on that path, that whatever you make, whatever pathway that you make an effort upon, whatever focus you have upon your children. And remember, I'm not saying that only put them in that and they should know about nothing else. And that's why I gave Habib's example. That's why I gave all these other. They're like the best athletes in the world. They're not like one-track minded. Many of them, they're not alims, they're not hafiz, but deen is number one to them. And the influence of that person who deen was number one to him, it had more effect on the world than the bayan of any dawah. Any da'i. No da'i had that effect that these now it's ongoing. It's not done. Now they've just come up, the Dagestani fighters. Some of the management, they're all mad. Like, why are these guys dominating? None of them even speak English properly. People who don't even speak English properly, people who are like hardcore Muslim, they pray 5 times a day, they don't eat pork, they don't even look at the women newscasters. They don't even look at them, they don't even want to talk to them. And it's like, but they're dominating. And their faith is one. And they fast in the month of Ramadan. And they've put out so much da'wah that it's amazing. How many people have been exposed to Islam through them? And this shows the importance of, as parents, our fikr and our gham. Where should it be and what should our focus be? May Allah give us tawfiq to understand that. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillah.